December 1944, the Battle of the Bulge. German forces were trapped. Patton's Third Army had smashed into their southern flank. American forces were closing the pocket. Total encirclement seemed hours away. Then German scouts found an opening, a narrow corridor to the east. An escape route, salvation. They took it. Thousands of German soldiers fled down that road, abandoning equipment, breaking formation, running for their lives. That's when Patton's artillery opened fire. Fighter bombers appeared overhead. The escape route became a killing zone. One German officer who survived wrote, "The trap wasn't that we were surrounded. The trap was that we were given hope before being destroyed." Patton understood something his enemies didn't. Sometimes the cruelest thing you can do is give people a way out. Subscribe. This gets dark. Patton was applying a principle as old as warfare itself. The deliberate escape corridor. Sun Tzu wrote 2,500 years ago, "When you surround an army, leave an outlet free. Do not press a desperate foe too hard." The logic: completely surrounded enemies fight to the death. Give them escape hope and they break formation trying to flee, making them easier to destroy. Medieval siege warfare used this tactic constantly. Besieging armies would leave one gate unguarded, then position archers along the escape route. Defenders who tried to flee were cut down in organized retreat that became panicked rout. Napoleon understood it. At several battles, he deliberately left enemy retreat routes open, then used cavalry to massacre fleeing formations. Broken armies suffered more casualties retreating than they would defending to the last man. Patton had studied military history obsessively. He knew these examples, and during the Battle of the Bulge, he saw the perfect opportunity to apply the ancient principle with modern firepower. The difference was that historical commanders used the tactic with arrows and cavalry. Patton had artillery that could hit targets miles away and fighter bombers that could strike fleeing columns from above. The escape corridor became mechanized slaughter. December 22, 1944, Patton's Third Army attacked the southern flank of the German Bulge offensive. The German plan had been to drive west, split Allied forces, and capture Antwerp. But American resistance at Bastion and elsewhere had stalled the offensive. German units were overextended, supplies were running low, and Patton's counterattack threatened to cut them off. By late December, multiple German divisions faced encirclement. American forces were pushing from the south and west. Other Allied units were attacking from the north. The Germans in the Bulge salient risked being trapped in a pocket with no escape. Complete encirclement would have created desperate enemies. Trapped German forces would fight fanatically because they had no choice. Casualties on both sides would be massive. The fighting would be prolonged and brutal. Patton understood something his enemies didn't. Sometimes the cruelest thing you can do is give people a way out. Make it obvious. Let German commanders see the corridor and believe they could extract their forces, then destroy them during the retreat. His staff questioned this approach. Why not close the pocket completely and force mass surrender? Patton's response: surrounded men fight like cornered rats. Running men die like sheep. The decision was calculated, cold-blooded, and devastatingly effective. Patton didn't accidentally leave gaps in his lines. He deliberately positioned forces to create a specific escape route. Intelligence identified German command thinking. Interrogation of captured officers and intercepted communications revealed German commanders were planning withdrawal. If the Bulge offensive failed, they'd retreat eastward toward the German border. Patton positioned forces to funnel retreat. American units sealed off western and southern routes while leaving eastern corridors apparently open. The gaps weren't accidental. They were carefully calculated to channel German retreat down specific roads. The corridor was made obvious. Patton wanted German reconnaissance to find the escape route. He pulled back some forward positions just enough to create a visible gap. German scouts reported the opening to their commanders as if they discovered it through clever reconnaissance. Artillery and air assets were prepositioned. While German forces saw an open corridor, Patton had already positioned artillery with pre-plotted coordinates covering the escape routes. Fighter-bomber squadrons were briefed on the roads German forces would use. The timing was coordinated. Patton waited until German forces were already demoralized, running low on supplies and psychologically ready to retreat. Then he increased pressure on all other fronts, making the eastern escape route look like the only option. The Germans took the bait exactly as Patton predicted. They saw the corridor, concluded they could extract their forces, and began organized withdrawal that quickly became panicked flight. When German forces began retreating through the corridor, Patton's trap closed. Artillery opened fire first. American forward observers called in coordinates. Shells began falling on roads packed with retreating Germans. Not random fire, but carefully targeted barges hitting choke points, bridges, intersections, narrow sections where traffic concentrated. Fighter-bombers followed. P-47 Thunderbolts and P-51 Mustangs strafed retreating columns. They targeted vehicles first, destroying trucks and tanks, created roadblocks that trapped following units. Then they attacked the trapped infantry with machine guns and rockets. The attacks were timed to create maximum chaos. Artillery would hit the front of a column, stopping movement. Then aircraft would attack the rear, preventing retreat. The middle sections were trapped between burning vehicles with nowhere to go. Psychological warfare amplified the damage. Loudspeakers broadcast surrender appeals in German. Leaflets dropped from aircraft promised safety to those who gave up, but the message was clear. Keep running and die, or surrender and live. German formations broke completely. Officers lost control of their men. Soldiers abandoned equipment and ran. Units that had been organized military formations hours earlier dissolved into panicked mobs of individuals trying to survive. One German battalion commander later described, "We'd maintained discipline through the entire offensive. 2 hours on that road and my battalion ceased to exist as a military unit." The escape corridor didn't just destroy German forces physically, it destroyed them psychologically. Hope became weapon. Soldiers who thought they were escaping experienced crushing despair when the attacks began. The psychological whiplash from relief at finding escape to terror at being trapped was more damaging than simple encirclement would have been. Trust in leadership evaporated. German soldiers blamed their officers for leading them into the trap. Officers who'd ordered the retreat through the corridor lost all authority. Men stopped following orders because orders had led to slaughter. Unit cohesion disappeared permanently. Even soldiers who survived and regrouped never reformed effective units. They'd experienced total breakdown of military organization. The memory of panicked flight, abandoned equipment, and every man for himself survival destroyed their ability to function as coordinated forces. Survivors spread defeatism. Unlike soldiers who'd simply been defeated in battle, those who'd experienced the corridor retreat told stories of calculated massacre. They described American forces deliberately letting them run before destroying them. This created fear throughout German ranks about any future retreat. Moral injury was severe. Professional soldiers experiencing such complete humiliation suffered lasting trauma. Post-war accounts describe feelings of having been toyed with, hunted like animals, deliberately given hope before having it destroyed. The effectiveness of Patton's escape corridor tactic was measurable. Casualty ratios were devastating. German forces attempting to retreat through the corridors suffered 60 to 70% casualties, far higher than units that either surrendered immediately or defended fixed positions. The combination of artillery, air attacks, and panic made retreat the deadliest option. Equipment losses were total. Units attempting escape abandoned tanks, artillery, and vehicles when they became trapped. American forces captured or destroyed more German equipment from panicked retreats than from organized battles. Prisoner yields increased. Demoralized survivors surrendered in large numbers rather than trying to continue fighting. The psychological trauma of the retreat made them willing to accept captivity rather than risk similar experiences. Time efficiency was remarkable. Destroying German forces through the escape corridor took days instead of weeks. Complete encirclement and siege would have required prolonged operations. The corridor tactic achieved faster results with lower American casualties. Intelligence value was exceptional. Captured soldiers from units destroyed in the corridors provided extensive information during interrogation. Their demoralization made them cooperative. They blamed German leadership for the disaster and felt no loyalty worth protecting through silence. German commanders quickly recognized what Patton was doing, but recognition didn't help them counter it. Some ordered troops to defend in place rather than retreat through apparent escape routes. This worked better tactically, but created different problems. Troops resented being ordered to fight hopeless battles while escape seemed possible. Others attempted coordinated fighting withdrawals. They tried maintaining unit organization during retreat using rear guards and defensive positions. But Patton's artillery and air power prevented organized movements. Any force that stopped to establish defensive positions was immediately attacked. A few tried surrendering en masse. They recognized that organized capitulation was safer than attempted escape. Patton's forces generally accepted such surrenders, proving his goal was destroying resistance, not maximizing enemy casualties. Desperate commanders tried deception. They sent small units down escape corridors to draw American fire, hoping to identify safe routes. This rarely worked. American forces had enough firepower to engage multiple targets simultaneously. Some attempted night retreats. Moving in darkness reduced air attack vulnerability but made navigation difficult and prevented coordinated movement. Units got lost, separated, and were easier to destroy piecemeal. The fundamental problem was that once German forces were in the Bulge salient with Patton attacking from the south, they had no good options. Fight and be destroyed in place, retreat and be destroyed on the roads, surrender and lose honor but survive. Patton's escape corridor tactic raises difficult questions about the ethics of warfare. Was it a war crime? Technically, no. Attacking retreating enemies is legal under laws of war. Patton wasn't violating Geneva Convention or international law. Retreat doesn't grant combatants immunity from attack. Was it cruel? The tactic deliberately manipulated enemy psychology by offering false hope. Critics argue this crosses ethical lines, even if legal. Warfare should minimize suffering, not maximize psychological trauma. Was it necessary? Defenders argue the tactic saved Allied lives by destroying enemy forces quickly with minimal risk to American troops. Complete encirclement would have caused more casualties on both sides. What about proportionality? Laws of war require military actions to be proportional to objectives. Was destroying German morale through psychological manipulation proportionate, or did it cause unnecessary suffering beyond legitimate military purposes? Did it poison post-war relations? Some argue tactics like Patton's created lasting bitterness that complicated post-war reconciliation. Others countered that decisive defeat was necessary for Germany to accept total surrender. These questions don't have clear answers. Patton's tactic was legal, effective, and reduced Allied casualties, but it achieved those results through calculated psychological cruelty that remains ethically controversial. Patton's success with escape corridor tactics influenced American military doctrine for decades. Korean War applications. American forces in Korea used similar tactics against Chinese and North Korean units. Apparent escape routes were left open, then targeted with artillery and air strikes. The principle remained effective. Vietnam complications. The tactic was less effective against guerrilla forces who didn't retreat in organized columns. But when conventional North Vietnamese units attempted withdrawal, American forces applied Patton's principles with helicopters and B-52 strikes. Current U.S. military doctrine includes deliberate gap-leaving in encirclement operations. The terminology has changed, but the concept remains. Give enemies an escape route you can destroy rather than forcing last-stand battles. Psychological operations emphasis. Patton's recognition that destroying enemy morale was as important as destroying enemy forces influenced development of modern psychological warfare doctrine. Ethical training inclusion military MIs now teach Patton's tactics as case studies in the ethics of psychological warfare. Future officers study the effectiveness alongside the moral questions. The escape corridor remains a recognized tactical option. Controversial, but undeniably effective when conditions allow its application. December 1944, German forces trapped in the Bulge saw an escape route opening before them. They ran for it. Thousands of soldiers abandoning positions, leaving equipment, breaking formation in desperate flight towards safety. The corridor was a lie. Patton had positioned his forces specifically to funnel German retreat into killing zones. Artillery coordinates were pre-plotted. Fighter bombers were waiting. The escape route was a slaughterhouse. German units that had fought effectively for weeks dissolved in hours. Not because they were surrounded with no hope, but because they were given hope and then systematically destroyed while trying to reach it. Patton understood that the cruelest defeats aren't those where enemies fight to the death. They're the ones where enemies run, believing they can escape, only to be hunted down during the attempt. The escape corridor was legal. It was effective. It saved American lives, and it was psychologically devastating to German forces who experienced it. Ancient generals knew this tactic. Patton perfected it with modern firepower, and German commanders who survived never forgot the terror of fleeing down roads that became graves. Was it brilliant tactics or unnecessary cruelty? History records it as both. A masterpiece of psychological warfare that achieved decisive results through calculated manipulation of enemy hope and fear.